Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the plenary training of the Gas Policy Development Project 2. The GPDP is supported by the U.S. Department of State, making these series of trainings possible. Today's course will focus on the aspect of process safety and occupational health of the Philippine downstream natural gas industry. This is the first out of 7 sessions of the plenary training series. The plenary training, which will be held through the whole month of March, will offer introductory courses for all of the critical agencies on the 7 disciplines involved in the LNG industry. Please take note of this month's training schedules flashed on the screen. After the plenary trainings during this month, we will conduct a 2-part training for each of your agencies. Here, we will tackle the proposed regulatory process, checklist, and the codes and standards specifically recommended for your agency's adoption. Schedules for the checklist and the codes and standards training will be finalized and coordinated with you. So please expect an email from us regarding this. The goal of these trainings is to strengthen the capacity and develop the competency of agencies and LGUs that will handle the downstream natural gas industry in its effectuation. Our courses will be presented by our esteemed engineering experts who will share the best practice techniques and approaches. So before we start, we wish to acknowledge the following agencies with us today: Bureau of Customs, Department of Labor and Employment Bureau of Working Conditions, Laguna Lake Development Authority, Marina, and Philippine Coast Guard. Thank you very much for being with us today. Let us also acknowledge the presence of the DOE OIMB team and the GPDP team. So just a few reminders before we move on to our training discussion. If you have any questions to our lecturer, you may type it in the chat box. We will be reading your questions during our Q&A session after the presentation. You may also take note of your questions and press the raise hand icon during the Q&A session. And lastly, kindly make sure to answer the attendance form posted in the chat box. Certificates will be released after all plenary training sessions are conducted. Now, let's proceed to our training discussion. The Process Safety and Occupational Health course will be lectured by Engineer Carmelita Villanueva. Engineer Villanueva is a chemical engineer by profession. She is an industry practitioner, having worked in the oil and gas industry and the downstream chemicals industry for more than 20 years. Her industry expertise is in technical policy and regulatory framework for the oil, natural gas, and chemical industry, HSSE management in risk management and value engineering, and food safety engineering. She is currently the Deputy Technical Director of the GPDP2. She is also a senior lecturer at the Department of Chemical Engineering at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and at the UP National Engineering Center. She designs and teaches chemical process, industry-related, and HSSE courses. Now let's give the virtual floor to Engineer Melit Villanueva. Meli.
Thank you, Angelou. May I share my screen now?
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Again, welcome everyone. I think most of you have we've met for some time since GPDP1 and throughout this GPDP2, no? Welcome back, and this time we will be having some plenary training for the purpose of, having an overview of the entire discipline that encompasses the PD&GI. No? And more or less, you will the different agencies will more or less get the glimpse of how these different agencies work in managing PD&GI, especially the technical side. Okay. All right. I think Angelo have started introducing the technical training beginning this month up to August, and there will be schedule that you can attend. For the plenary, everyone is welcome, but for the next succeeding months, it will be customized per agency, because we will be discussing specific regulation, and at the same time, the proposed codes and standards for adoption, which is a key in moving forward to adopting the proposed regulatory process. My plenary session for this for this afternoon will be focused on the process safety and occupational health. It will touch specifically on the process safety as it is correlated with occupational health. And I will be dealing more on product management, because the other aspect of process safety, like facilities, fire and explosion, structural engineering, geotechnical engineering, and marine and coastal, will be discussed by other experts more on the details. So I guess it's the discussion for today will be an overview. There will be a separate discussion per aside from having specific agency, LGUs, we will also be discussing with the policymakers and potential investors. So all of these are in cooperation with our partner, DOE, Department of Energy, in particularly the OIMB division and the natural gas division. Okay. For the remaining schedule, you can email Angelo. And at the same time, we will also be sending again notices for you to be reminded. Okay? So the discussion for this afternoon I will detail the scope of my study, because some of probably what you have in mind might be out of scope, but I will try to answer that specifically during the April session, the one that is customized for agency. But right now, I just would like to give everyone an overview of what is process safety and occupational health. I will also be providing you some fundamentals on product information. Repeatedly, paulit-ulit natin, ano ba ang LNG, no? But it's sometimes, good to be back to basic. I will also discuss the specific hazards of LNG and the basic risk assessment. The general LNG safety encompasses, again, PSOH, some case studies and emerging trends, and specifically, I will also be discussing the occupational health, which is very new to the industry. Although our friends from DOLE have started with the Bureau of Working Condition, we actually coordinate with them on what else we could be of help, especially occupational health that is customized for LNG industry. And lastly, I will provide you what we have done for the GPDP2, the PSOH-based proposed regulatory process. Okay. All right. Let me start with giving you the LNG safety profile that more or less we should know that it's has an overall excellent safety record since 1964 without any incident of LNG loss through breaching or equipment failure. And why is it? I mean, what are the factors that contribute to the safety profile? It is because the industry with safe and secure operations are in place worldwide. Personnel competency, which is actually we're doing right now. We provide trainings for competency, additional competency of the agencies. LNG product handling are well understood. Paulit-ulit, sabi nga nila, tinuturo natin paulit-ulit para lang tayong first year, second year, third year engineering. Plant design are proven through many years. Wala tayong naririnig ng mga except the one that's happening in Russia and Ukraine, no? But that is a something isolated case. And of course, the codes and standards and regulations have been developed for the industry, and we are actually doing right now is customizing it or localizing it for the Philippine industry. Okay. However, there should be sustainability in doing this, because learning will not stop in just one point. We should all have continuous learning in order for us to sustain this development. And right now, we are actually in cooperation. We are actually supporting a lot of DOE initiative on developing and promoting LNG industry, which is the downstream right now. Okay, so again, the key here is the adoption of the codes and standards in the design, operations, and maintenance of the LNG operation and facilities, compliance to government regulation, and at the same time, adapting to what the agencies will be promoting. Okay, so again, it's more on helping one another, the agency sector and the business sector. Okay, the scope of study will be the downstream, the Philippine downstream natural gas industry value chain, which is starting with importation. We all know that Malampaya will be depleting soon, so we have the DOE started the program of promoting importation of LNG. So it will be on the use of international LNG ships, carriers delivered to the ports, connected to an onshore terminal or a floating operation, or what you call FSRU or FSU. Distribution will be via international and domestic LNG ships and carriers, and processing, which will be done on OIT, onshore import terminals connected to the port or at the floating processing, the FSRU. So again, we have discussed this before during 2 plenaries ago when we presented the project results, which is the PRP. And again, we will repeatedly discuss this during the discussion with the agencies in April, towards the month of April, May, and June. The business type we considered are at least 6, the onshore import terminal, FSRU, floating storage unit, bunkers, the bunkering operation, LNG ships, and trucks. So I welcome the Marina, PCG, PPPA participants here, because we will be offering a lot of trainings for them, especially with my other colleagues on facilities, coastal, and marine. So in understanding the facility elements or components of each business type, we have listed down what we have considered in the project. So from onshore terminal up to the bunkering, we have this loading and unloading facilities, high and low pressure pumps, LNG regasification. So we have considered each component in understanding the LNG operation and facilities, and at the same time adapting it to the proposed regulatory process. So nitty-gritty po yung ginawa namin for the last ika-third year na ito since GPDP1, and we have another 8 months before with the UP Department of Chemical Engineering R3D and DNGI project, which is also connected to the GPDP1. So mahaba-haba pong pag-aaral ang ginawa namin para maging maayos ang regulatory framework natin. At the same time, it will be, conducive to dealing with the LNG industry. No? Walang hirap, kumbaga sabi nga nila, ease of doing business. So, nandun po yung, adapted po yun dun sa objective namin. The discipline for the process, proposed regulatory process includes, of course, the main part is the process safety and occupational health. The stages of business from pre-construction, which is basically the plant design, where a proponent will apply for the notice to proceed and the PSERM and the POM. So aware po kayo dyan because you are actually one of the agencies that they comply, they submit their application. Understanding hazards and risks. So sa discipline din po ito, we actually clarify the difference between hazards and risks, and there is really a difference. So baka may nagsasabi kasi, we can build a plant that is zero hazard. No, there's no such thing as zero hazard because hazard is a property. Hindi mo siya masisira. It's an inherent property. So we will discuss that later. Process safety issues correlated with occupational health. You probably must have think bakit magkasama ang process safety and occupational health. Our DOLE colleagues will know this because once you have the process safety in place in your plant, the good working condition of your personnel will be in place. So product handling, product management, encompasses process safety. And once it is all in place, there will be good working condition for the personnel. The agencies involved are those which have mandates for the existing LNG industry. So we have identified them. But the specific issues for, I think I mentioned this, I will just focus my discussion on process safety, but the specific details on equipment, other discipline will be discussed in details in the succeeding weeks, okay? What are the fundamentals we consider in process safety and occupational health? The hazard itself of LNG, which comes from two major properties of LNG, which is being a cryogenic fluid and as a volatile and flammable fuel. So we have listed down, I think, 9 specific, which is applicable to Philippine setting. Kasi marami pa yan like marami pang mga ibang hazards, but these are not applicable to the Philippine setting, especially in our environment, weather, and environmental and social condition. So we have just chosen those that are really applicable, like cryogenic embrittlement, cryogenic exposure, fires and explosion, vapor cloud flash fire, jet fire, pool fire, vapor cloud explosion, rollover, and asphyxiation. So we will, I'll give you an overview of all of these hazards. Though the LNG industry has an excellent record, which I actually mentioned earlier, because of adoption to the engineering standards, physical and chemical properties of LNG are well understood. Like I mentioned earlier, paulit-ulit product management, the plant designs are well proven, and codes and standards are adopted. So the challenge will be for the agencies, which we are actually helping out. Paano mo ilo-localize yung mga international codes and standards adaptable to Philippine setting? There is a huge list of codes and standards, but the challenge will be how are we going to localize it that is adaptable to Philippine setting? And that's what we will be doing in the succeeding months and years. Ituturo natin sa inyo at tuturuan nyo rin kami at the same time because it's gonna be an interactive approach in making this project works. Hindi rin namin malalaman kung ano yung how your mandates will be, being run, and how are we going to apply those we see fit for the Philippine setting. Again, we are actually have to study the risk. The risk is actually something like probability that something bad could happen. Kasi pag sinabi mong risk, there is a connotation of negativity, no? Hindi siya positive. So when you say risk, there is a probability that something could happen based on what? The hazards. So the risk is really something you have to assess based on the hazard. So the question now is, are we going to say zero risk? Hindi rin po eh. Kasi there's always what we call minimum risk, medium risk, or higher risk. So again, the challenge will be how are we going to minimize the risk in order for them to be acceptable. Parang when we use hexane solvent in extracting coconut oil, hexane is a toxic solvent, but they have to, regulate the formulation or the properties to be FDA approved so that it could be used in the food industry. But then again, hexane properties are still there. It is the matter of handling how hexane could be used in the food industry. So ganun din po yung ating gagawin dito. What are those hazards that we need to manage in order for the risk to be acceptable? So again, it's a risky industry, sabi nga nila. Parang sinasabi nila, chemical industry is a risky industry. Lahat ng chemicals na merong carbon atom at hydrogen atom, risk po yan. It's just a matter of how are we going to handle them. Okay? The fundamentals of process safety is, again, I have repeatedly say there is an unsafe incident or condition that could happen. So because of the risk of that could happen to human, could result into human injury, could result into environmental damage, and could result into economic loss. Pag nagde-design po ng planta, especially for us, kasi chemical engineers will start the design of the plant and followed by other discipline like mechanical, electrical, etc., etc. So ang una namin kino-consider in understanding the risk is human injury. That is why occupational health is so important. And then followed by environmental damage. Lastly, economic loss. Kasi ang economic loss is by default, given na yan. Hindi ka magde-design ng planta kung hindi profitable. Kapitalista pa rin po tayo, no? So, huli yan. But then again, the challenge again is the human factor and the environmental factor. Kaya it's so important that all of these factors should be considered in understanding the risk, which are based on the inherent hazard of LNG. May contain hazardous materials like flammable, explosives, reactivity, or toxicity. So in different forms, LNG could be flammable. In different condition, LNG could be explosive. In different condition, again, or handling, LNG could be reactive. And again, in different temperature, LNG could be toxic. So yun po yung madalas nating pinag-aaralan at ina-adapt kung ano yung dapat for the process safety. There's also a huge energy required for the process in processing, like for gasification, etc., that is contained in a material. So again, we have to consider the inherent property of this. Again, there's occupational hazards, which I will be discussing later, and environmental hazards, which will be discussed by my other colleague in, I think, the last week of March. So, lahat yan ine-encompass ng process safety. Of course, yung sa occupational, environmental, may input din po yung mga ibang discipline doon, which they will tackle lightly during their discussion. Assessing and how are we going to understand the risk and applying controls. Kasi hindi naman tayo agad-agad mag-a-apply ng controls. We have to understand what specific controls are we going to apply in order for us to manage the risk. Sabi ko nga, there should be no zero risk. It should be minimized lang so that it could be acceptable. Sa industry po natin, wala talaga tayong pwedeng sabihing zero eh. It's just minimization for us to be acceptable. Kasi nandun pa rin yung danger and nandun pa rin yung threat. It's just the management of it. So, we have to assess it first. So, yung mga assessing the risk, maraming tools siya na ginagamit, which we will be discussing in specific agency na sa April. Kasi masyadong detalyado na po yun eh. And hindi masyadong ma-appreciate ng mga ibang agency. So there are several tools to assess the risk. Scientific tools po at saka mathematical tools na kayang-kaya po natin as an engineer. No? And then from these tools na na-assess natin, we can readily get the result, whether it is low risk, medium risk, or high risk. So, based on the magnitude of risk, whether it's low, high, or medium, we can apply the control. So, the controls will encompass the safety process. Yun yung gagawin mong control. Hindi yung kagawa ka lang parang pick and parang get the whole and pick, hindi po. Kino-customize po natin ang pag-apply ng controls. Otherwise, aside from being expensive, magiging parang overkill ang iba. So, let's just be efficient in applying what are those controls needed in understanding the risk, or what we call managing the risk. Okay, so it will encompass the safety process, again, based on engineering codes and standards. Occupational health, kasama po yon. Sabi ko nga, correlated yon. Pag sinabi mong toxic, so bukod sa pagiging toxic sa planta sa process, meron niyang toxicity application kung severe, low, or high sa occupational health. Ganon din sa environmental condition. So, tatlo yung matatakel niya kaagad. And this is actually what we call mitigating controls. So, kompleto yan sa bawat isa. Again, saan po papasok yung mga ibang discipline? Diyan din po sa tatlong yan. So, makikita ninyo once you attend the next succeeding discipline, makikita din po ninyo na nandoon po yung elements ng managing the risk by applying mitigating control. So, it's a good thing ako yung nag-start kasi nasa akin yung product management eh. It all boils down on how are we understand the hazard and the risks of managing LNG product. Okay? So, again, when you talk about process safety, baka meron kayong ibang librong ginagamit, this is also defined as loss prevention that is widely used in the process industry. Pero pag generically ginagamit namin for all, process safety. But pag you are involved in actual process or operation, it is called loss prevention. Okay? So, what are the main considerations in managing the risk and applying controls in the LNG industry? There are three. The safe processing, which is the operation itself, the process in the receiving terminal, the storage, and the transport. So sa PDNGI, ito yung tatlong importanteng titignan natin para maintindihan natin how are we going to manage the risk. And there are two basic paths to follow for safe operation. That is, again, paulit-ulit, the adoption of codes and standard and the process safety management. This is like something, a safety plan, no? Meron bawat operation. So, I think ito isa sa mga chine-check ng DOLE at ng DENR, yung kanilang safety and environmental plan. And pag nagde-design din kami ng planta, sinasama din po namin itong factor ng pag-draft ng PSM para alam nila once we consider all the mitigating controls, dito papasok. So, I hope you understand how are we going to, understand the safety based on the hazard and the risk. And the controls is not just applying which is kung ano yung available, no? We apply specific controls based on how we assess the risk and what is the severity of the risk. Meron kasi tayong controls for low, high, and severe cases ng risk. So, again, those are things that will be discussed in details sa April, May, and June training. This is just an overview. I also provided you some of the basic hierarchy of safety programs. So, para siyang pyramid, hindi lang siya naka-pyramid. Pag nag-i-introduce kami ng process safety sa chemical design, plant design. So, zero, of course, neglecting, reactionary, which is most of those plants that are prone to explosion kasi reactionary lang sila. Compliance, ganun din. 1 and 2 could be the same. 3 is managing systems such as process safety management. Just 3 is more on the need to follow. So, walang effort. But when you talk about 4 and 5, there are initiatives. And these are studied further. And actually, there's sustainability in it. sila mismo ang the company itself, yung planta mismo, ang nag-iisip paano nila masusustain yung safety procedures nila by doing regular safety audit, which is part of the PSM. So again, when you talk about safety audit, ito yung part na sinasabi natin dito magsusustain at dito papasok yung reviewing the risk assessment. If you happen to run for a certain period of time, years, if you happen to run an efficient operation, planta, yung kanyang efficiency ng planta, risk could be low. And you can actually review the controls that you are applying. Baka masyado ng overkill ang mga controls, and probably the economics of running a plant could be lowered down when you keep on reviewing it and apply the necessary or what is actually adaptable at the moment. There are also emerging technologies that can be applied. So merong initiative ang 5 and 4, and these are usually done by multinational companies. So they keep on reviewing this, a department that keep on reviewing. They even have a standalone audit and review department na walang makakatouch. I think they are directly reporting to the president, something like that. I remember when I was with a multinational company, every one of us as an engineer dream of joining the audit team because we directly report to the president. And during our time, we directly report to the director in London. So medyo napaka-elitista ng grupo na yon because they're doing a critical role in reviewing the safety. And this could, summarize into one that multinational companies put a lot of impact and effort and everything in managing safety. Malaki kasi ang consequence pag sumabog and magkaroon ng shutdown, Sabi nga nila, a 1-minute shutdown could result to 1 month loss of profit, which is not acceptable to any multinational company. The basic information and definition. So, magkaroon tayo ng one-on-one definition and product information. So, I was stunned by that number of participants. Wow, 89. Sa klase ko po kasi pag online teaching lang kami, masaya na kami sa 20 participants wherein we have a total of 40 student, kalahati lang. But this is some sort of nakaka-boost ng moral, our efforts in understanding the LNG and, helping the industry are all being paid up because of this participation from all of you. Thank you very much. Okay, the definitions, let's define LNG, LPG, LNG versus LPG, and LNG versus NGL, para may basic knowledge tayo. Kasi minsan, ano ba yan? LPG or LNG? Pag sinabing natural gas, ito yung ine-extract kasama ng crudo. So, mauuna ang natural gas sa well, sa reservoir. Mauuna ang natural gas na lalabas, susunod ang crudo, huli ang water. Mabigat kasi ang water, nasa ilalim siya. Pag nag-extract ka ng natural gas, pag lumalabas na yung crudo, you stop, look for another wells kasi crudo na yung lumalabas Pero pag water na, you close the wells. Ganon yung basic understanding ng reservoir management. So, sa Malampaya, I think what they have done there is really to look for natural gas lang. Meron kasing mga reservoir na natural gas lang ang gusto nilang kuhanin. Meron namang reservoir na maraming crudo. O sige, kukuha muna ako ng natural gas. Tapos, i-reprocess ko na lang. And then, my main point is getting the crudo. So, ganun po yun. Natural gas liquid, ito yung liquid form nung lumabas sa reservoir, which is a combination of light hydrocarbon. Kasi nga, nasa taas siya. The upper level siya. So, ethane, propane, butane, and traces of heavy condensate. So, ginagamit ito sa paggawa ng mga petrochemical products, which is yung tinatawag nating mga polymers, nandun yun. Mga hydrocarbon derivatives. And at the same time, pwede ring i-channel sa LPG, sa paggawa. So, nandito po yung isang diagram na magpapakita kung ano yung component ng LPG, LNG, at ano yung NGL, natural gas liquid. So, wag nating there's a difference between NGL and LNG. So, pag sinabing liquefied petroleum gas, galing siya sa crudo, sa refinery. Ang in-input mo doon is, the feedstock is the crudo. So, ang unang lalabas sa taas, of course, you have the gas and then the LPG itself. So, merong lalabas din ng mga naphtha for petrochemical, madami. So, ang kukunin mo yung LPG. Right now, sa Pilipinas, may gumagawa pa ng LPG from the refinery, which is Petron. Meron pa silang refinery. But like Shell, they are importing na. Dati gumagawa sila ng from the refinery. Basta may refinery, pwede mo i-configure to make into LPG. Okay? So, Petron still has the LPG processing. So, LPG is 95% propane and small quantities of butane. Depende again kung ano yung properties ng feedstock. Kasi it all boils down again to the quality of the feedstock. Like, saan tayo kumukuha ng crudo, medyo yung dark crudo siya. Ay, hindi siya yung paano ko ba explain dito? Mag-petroleum 101 lecture tayo. Hindi siya dark. May light, sweet, sour, and dark, parang ganon. Anyway, it connotes to the quality of the crudo. And then when you talk about LNG, it is the liquid portion or the liquid of the natural gas. Ayan po, it's a liquid form of natural gas. So, it again depends on the quality of the natural gas. When cooled at atmospheric pressure, very low, -162 and below, it condenses into liquid. So, ito yung tinatawag na cryogenic temperature. So, cryogenic liquid siya. So, ito yung iikot yung ating safe handling kasi LNG being a cryogenic liquid. And the critical temperature and pressure of natural gas are around -82 degrees C and 46 bar. Hindi ko na-convert into atmosphere. Later on, pag sinubmit ko po ito for your copy, maglalagay po ako ng conversion dito. Okay? Composed primarily of methane, the LNG, 90%, and with traces of heavier hydrocarbons, ethane, propane, or butane, and typically less than 1% of the nitrogen. LNG in its liquid state is not explosive or flammable unless there's a condition that will make it explode and flammable, which we will be discussing later on in the hazards and risk discussion. No? So, again, sabi ko nga, there's the hazard of being flammable and explosive. But from a different perspective of having it in liquid, gaseous state, merong severity ng kanilang risk. Whether it's explosive, flammable, etc. So, handling is the most important thing for us to understand kung paano. And these are all, has scientific evidence. So, madali tayong makakuha ng answer on this. Pre-liquefaction process, paano nililiquefy? meron tayong tinatawag na gas cleaning. So tinatanggal yung mga traces ng oxygen, carbon dioxide, sulfur na could, contribute to the corrosion and problem of containing the LNG. So, linisan muna siya. Parang yung crudo natin, tinatanggalan natin ng sulfur, no? Para acceptable siya sa mga ating motor fuel vehicle. Na-shock pa kayo sa presyo ng crudo, ng petroleum ngayon? Parang mag-bike na lang ho tayo. 75 per liter. I understand, siguro more than 15 years ago, nagpupustahan ho kami ng aming mga colleagues sa company where I worked before, na pag nag 50 per liter ang gasolina, luluwag ang EDSA. At that time, more than 15 years ago, 50 pesos. Kasi may war ata at that time. Kaya tumaas yung 50 per liter ng premium gasoline. True enough, lumuwag ang EDSA, naging 55 per liter ata. So, ewan ko ngayon kung maluwag ang EDSA kasi hindi naman ako lumalabas. So, let's just hope everything will be settled. Well, during this time of pandemic and other mga geopolitical war, we all have in our hearts our hope, trust, and faith na maaayos din po. Sabi nga nila, they will be done. Nakakaiyak lang pag iisipin mo after the pandemic, ito naman. Although hindi pa tayo tapos sa pandemic. Anyway, vaporization is when the temperature rises about negative 162 degrees centigrade, the LNG converts to its gas and expand. So a conversion of 1 cubic meter of LNG expands to 600 cubic meter of gas. So ito po yung para pag explain na namin po sa inyo yung mga adopted standards and regulation. Ginagamit po namin itong mga basihan na to, mga basic fundamental properties. So upon vaporization, the resulting gas is denser than air and bumababa. Above negative 106.7, the gas rises and disperses into the atmosphere. Although, sabi ko nga, not explosive unless there is a concentration of gas in a confined space. So mamaya titignan po natin kung paano. So these are the hazard and risks and some mitigating controls na very basic in the LNG industry na talagang ito na yung, sabi ko nga, well set in place na for years na since 1964 na nagka-result ng ating well in place plant design process and LNG operation. Nakita po na yan. So recalling back the fundamental hazards associated with LNG, let's have it one by one. Pag sinabi hong cryogenic embrittlement, it's the choice of right material for the controls, no? Para ma-address natin yung risk ng cryogenic embrittlement. Ano yung risk ng cryogenic embrittlement? Mga frostbites, extreme cold temperature kasi nare-reduce yung strength ng chilled material. At the same time, merong structural failure. Itong mga structural failure, aside sa equipment, pati na rin po dun sa infrastructure. So, merong recommended material to be used, aluminum or 9% nickel steel alloys are often used in the global LNG industry. So, medyo hindi acceptable yung stainless steel, no? At above, to become brittle. Okay, yung cryogenic exposure, sabi ko nga, severe frostbite. although hindi mangyayari sa atin, pero pag nasa operation ka, yung mga taong nagmamanage nito, pwedeng magkaroon nito. At the same time, yung asphyxiation because of the vapor na nire-release niya could damage, could be inhaled, etc. So, medyo you talk about cryogenic exposure to correlated it to occupational health. Merong dermal exposure and yung tinatawag nilang inhalation din. Dermal, ano pa ba yung isa na nawala sa term ko. So mamaya titingnan natin ano yung ang pinaka ano kasi nito yung maraming cases na nakita, nabasa din namin sa mga journals are the asphyxiation issue no on inhalation. Lalo na yung may mga asthma. So pag sinabi mong asphyxiation, ito yung nade-deprive ka ng oxygen, nakaka-suffocate and it leads to unconsciousness which could result to death. So ang kailangan dito is proper PPE. So again, personnel in the LNG industry are well trained, including those the PPE management at paano ina-apply to sa tamang kondisyon. Hindi ka lang basa-basa magsusuot ng ganito when there's no application on it. Parang yung may gas mask ako nakita nung height ng ating pandemic, may naka-gas mask talaga, yung pang-chemical toxicity na bigla lang kami nakita namin. So, hanggang KN95 lang po tayo. So, overkill yun. Yun yung sinasabi kong hindi mo pinag-aralan yung risk nag-overkill ka ng controls So, you are using chemical gas mask for a pandemic COVID-19. No? KN95, which is the applicable mask to address the risk of COVID-19, plus dati nga I conform to yung ano ba yun, face shield. Ginagamit ko rin yun. Okay, the preventive measures in an LNG facility, oxygen and hydrocarbon content of the atmosphere should be constantly monitored to detect any gas leakage. Kasi it could result to something nakaka-suffocate, no? For maintenance of equipment naman, the operator is equipped with instrument to ensure sufficient oxygen is present before entry to any equipment. Lalo na pag pumapasok, yung mga tank cleaning na ginagawa pag na involved kayo sa operation. Papasok ka with all the PPE, nandoon po yun. So, maraming PPE management na i-consider pag alam mo yung risk. No? So, again, meron ding mga PPE na nasa magaang lang because there is the less severity ng risk na i-address ng PPE. Okay? So I hope you can follow the correlation between process safety and occupational health and then, understanding hazard and risk. All right. So far as an explosion naman, meron tayong mga tinatawag na, ito lang yung based on history and the industry, global industry, the 4 major fiery scenario, the vapor cloud flash fire, jet fire, full fire, and vapor cloud explosion, which we will be giving you an overview later. Explosions of LNG system are uncommon. Sabi ko nga, may safety record na as the material is stored near normal atmospheric pressure and oxygen is not allowed to enter containers with LNG. Although meron pa rin papasok. Kasi meron talagang risk. However, enclosed system will have the potential to create explosive environment. Tingnan natin. The vapor cloud flash fire, when a significant amount of LNG are exposed to the surrounding, may leak. So it could, ignite from a nearby ignition source pag merong lumapit na ignition source. So, pag understanding flash fire, vapor cloud sa mga planta operation, dito sila gumagawa ng risk assessment tool na tinatawag na hazard operability. So dito ina-apply kasi dito mo makikita lahat yung mga what if. So once you lalo na sa operation, sabi nga hazard operability, something could happen. What if? Deviating from the operation, the standard operation, something could happen. It could be human factor. It could be operational factor. It could be, by nature because of weather, floods, earthquake, etc. So you have to address that. So yung mga ignition sources, hindi natin alam kung, pero 3 point lang yan pwede. Nature, human, and yung human kasi sabotahe, no? And what else? It could be operation, equipment failure. In a flash fire, only parts of the vapor cloud with the appropriate ratio of oxygen to gas ignite. So, alam po natin to as an engineer. And people and equipment within the ignition zone can be, seriously harmed. But damage will be limited to those outside sa flammable area. So, i-contain lang talaga siya. So, sa safety management plan, process safety plan, kasama sa pag-address ang vapor cloud flash fire. Nandun lahat yung mga iniisa-isa. Yung colleague ko po sa fire and explosion, i-discuss po ito. Kung ano yung mga specific controls to be applied for a certain area doon sa operation. Of course, when I say operation, kasama po lahat yung business type, from terminal, FSRU, FSU, trucks, vessel. So, sinasabi ko lang po operation, but applicable po yung 5 business type, pati yung bunkering. So, doon po natin tinignan. At those agencies na naka-attend na ng aming mga discussion, nakita nila isa-isa yung component facility for business type. Nakalagay yung pag-address ng mga controls, pag-address ng mga risks. Okay? Jet fire naman is a vapors can also shoot out of a compromised containers as the name itself, jets of flammable gas. So, nagkakaroon siya ng action na ganito when the pressurized vapors are exposed to an ignition source again. Okay? And it is just confined to an immediate vicinity. And unlikely in the LNG facilities, pag well in place ang PSM. Why am I just discussing this? Kasi part siya ng history. It is good to know na we could all learn from history. Sa pag-design ng planta, diba, as an engineer, we all base our estimation on good practices which are based on history. Tapos ina-adapt na lang natin yung mga emerging trends and condition. Vaporizers and equipment involved in transport, nabanggit ko rin kanina na can be places where jet fires occur. So yung 5 business type could be a source of, jet fires could happen. So again, doon sa mga nilagay naming list na i-adapt, nandun po yung pag-address ng jet fire. Yung pool fire naman, para siyang pool na due to low heat capacity of air, nag-spill ang LNG that tend to reach the ground and magpo-form siya ng pools without completely vaporizing. And again, the pool can then ignite, causing what we call pool fire pag merong ignition source. Okay? Large pools of spilled LNG can cause massive pool fires. And it could be controlled in the design of containment using dikes to limit the spread of LNG fuel. So again, yung pag-design ng containment, merong standard ang NFPA 59. Yun yung isa sa mga ginagamit naming standard, allowing it to be consumed by fire in a controlled manner. Okay? Doon lang within the type of the containment. The vapor cloud explosion naman is pag dikit-dikit na what we call deflagration may occur. It can cause an extensive injuries and damage to property because of, sabi nga nila, supersonic ang pag-release nito eh. So, however, vapor cloud explosions are also rare in LNG, but it could happen because of the property of LNG. Again, dito din papasok yung diniscuss ko about low risk, medium risk, or high risk. Similar to jet fires, vapor cloud explosions are only feasible in some instances, such as during transport via LNG trucks. So, applicable din po ito. Okay. Let me also, again, hindi naman, konting apologies lang po. Kasi, lecturing in a remote condition, no, like what we are doing right now, we tend to write a lot in our presentation. So, napapopulate po siya ng document kasi hindi kami nakakapagsulat sa blackboard, hindi kami nakakapag-explain, etc. So, we tend to write everything in the PowerPoint. So, pag re-reviewin na ng mga participants, will be very good because plus the recording itself. Makakatulong para na rin kayo nagbabasa nanonood ng K-drama. Kompleto, merong subtitle po. So parang ganun lang. So apologies kung maliliit yung font pero pag print naman po ito or binasa nyo sa naka-expand na screen, kitang-kita naman po siya. Okay? Rollover naman, paano nangyayari ang rollover? Because merong differences ng density ng naiwang LNG sa ilalim ng tangke at yung kinargang LNG. So, nagkakaroon ngayon ng mixing para ma-lessen yung mag-overpressure yung tangke. So, the difference of LNG between the one that is loaded versus the one that is in the hill, yung latak na tinatawag, LNG hill, mas mabigat yung kinarga kaysa yung nasa ilalim. So nagkakaroon ngayon ng what we call stratification. So again, isa ito sa mga ina-address ng LNG process safety, yung sa rollover. So if LNG inventory is stored for a long period of time, merong kasing nagkakaroon ng differences in the density. And top layer of liquid can be affected by vaporization in the form of BOG. So dito papasok yung boil of gas. Liquid becomes richer and heavier than the lower layer. So magkakabit-kabit po siya. So, kung tutuusin po, if you will realize, simple lang ma-understand ang technology ng LNG. Straightforward eh. Hindi katulad ng mga ibang chemical process. This is just parang Sabi ko nga, parang mechanical approach lang siya, straightforward. So aralin mo lang kung ano yung what may lead to overpressure, ano yung dapat, you don't put the heavier, you have to consider the one in the retained heel para hindi magkaroon ng rollover. Para magano. So that's how you manage the controls. That's how you apply the controls in managing the risk of the rollover. Because it may lead to overpressure. Again, the hazard, ito yung overpressure could lead into tank burst. Nilagay ko rin dito kung ano yung mga titignan natin. Rising section of LNG during the switch encounter a reduction in pressure. What is the preventive measure? Includes store liquid at different density in different storage tank. Medyo magastos. Kaya lang sa mga ibang bansa ginagawa na yata ito. Sufficient mixing, constant monitoring of density and temperature before loading and unloading. Even in tanks, monitor storage tank boil-off rates and tank pressure. Recirculate the content within storage tank using low pressure send out. So kasama siya sa mga design nung tangke, nung tank design as part of the process safety management. And again, the use of multiple loading points. Other considerations, due to its low viscosity, the LNG can also easily penetrate porous materials and could pass through tight junction. So any system that handles LNG will need to be tightly secured to minimize leakage. Leidenfrost effect naman, yung cloud forming para makontrol niya yung boiling ng LNG. So, nako-contain pag nagde-design ka ng spill containment, ng spill drainage system, ng spill management. No? This is very, pag you are into LNG operation na talaga, yung Leidenfrost effect is something that we need to consider in the design of the spill containment system. Kasi kinokontrol niya yung vapor layer, yung pag-form ng vapor layer, kinokontrol niya yung boiling ng LNG. So nako-contain yung spill. However, sabi nga nila, yung higher velocities could result into splashing. Kailangan yung gagawing containment should protect the steel infrastructure or the metal infrastructure. So mostly ginagawa ito through the use of concrete base. So wala lang po akong picture dito. Actually, may nahanap ako kahapon ng spill containment. Pero pag mag-discuss ako with the DOLE, magpapakita ko ng mga spill containment. And I think sa structural and mechanical facilities, tomorrow I think merong kasama dito yung spill containment ng LNG. Yung mga paggawa ng mga containment system. Okay? So ito lang po yung mga importanteng malalaman natin na hazards. They are all in the internet. Madali po siyang, sabi ko nga, it's like a straightforward, no fuss, no fuss understanding of the technicalities of the hazard. So, ini-explain niya po, kahit mag-Wikipedia pa kayo, kahit, you read the handbook or everything like chemical process, pare-pareho lang po yung definition niya. Nothing rocket science in it. Maiintindihan po natin. Okay, in summary, before we take a break, again, sinamarize ko po lahat yung pinag-usapan natin, including yung mga spiel ko. And the primary focus of the LNG safety is the containment system to avoid exposure of LNG to ambient temperature. So there are two layers of protection, the equipment and the infrastructure. So pag sinabing equipment, storage tanks with constant contact with LNG. You have to consider the cryogenic property and the materials of construction. Meron tayong tinatawag na single containment, double containment, full containment, membrane, and in-ground. Again, these are all very specific na pag doon sa codes and standard na pinopose namin, nandun po yung specification na pwede nating i-adapt when we try to formulate all the checklists for the standardization of LNG regulation. Yung infrastructure, critical dito yung mga dikes, impound, yung mga containment facility, and the secondary tanks surrounding the primary, which is again considered as containment. And basically to, mitigate the spread of the spilled LNG. So again, going back to what I have discussed, you will not just design a dike or an impoundment dams. You will design based on the risk, how the magnitude of the risk that will, carry the spill, and at the same time, which is adaptable based on codes and standard. So, dikit-dikit lang po yan, parang domino effect. Hindi ka gagawa ng dam pag walang naging basihan. LNG ships use a different set of containment design. So, ito din i-discuss ng aming marine expert, spherical tank, yung mga ganito, pati yung coastal. Kasi they will deal with the FSRU, etc. LNG ships have double hulls to mitigate breaching. The primary focuses on containment is to avoid the LNG. Nasabi ko na pala to. The tank and other forms of containment, it is critical for respective equipment to be fully complied with the international codes and standard. Again, para po ma-address lahat ng itong controls. Kung whether ang controls mo ba is to address the severity of the risk or to address the low severity of the risk. Yung magnitude lang. Para at the same time, yung pag-design ng planta, yung economics papasok. Yung matitipid mo yung budget mo, yung cost of building the plant. Because of, you design based on the risk and how to address it. Periodical inspection of equipment is important. And sabi nga, tomorrow, mahaba-haba daw pong discussion ito. Kasi, based on the hazards I have mentioned, ang ating i-address yung corrosion at saka integrity ng equipment failure, yung mga breaks, which is, we don't want to happen in any operation, manufacturing operation or processing operation. Kasi it will result to shutdown and, loss prevention and loss of money. It could also, get into human injury or environmental issue. Material transfer, loading, and unloading must be supervised by trained personnel. So, ang mga processing plant, they have part ng kanilang PSM, the Process Safety Management, is the training of personnel, which is, sabi nga nila, IEC, information, education, and communication is a main ingredient in having a PSM work, a safety program work. Kailangan malaman, kahit mga sekretarya pa yan, kailangan alam nila ang safety process ng safety conditions na pwede nilang kaharapin. Yung they are aware of the danger. No? It is good to know the danger. No? Hindi nakakatakot yun. Kasi as an engineer, you will try to communicate it in a factual way. Hindi pananakot. Walang fake news sa science. We all have facts and valid information, justified information backed by science. So, parang yung ating mga health infectious disease expert, lahat ng kanilang mga pandemic advice are all backed by science. HACCP and HACCP are all important in practicing sustaining PSM, process safety management. And it should be the main risk assessment tool. So it's basically addressing what could go wrong in a plant kahit alam mong tama ang design mo. So it's something like any deviation could happen in a standard design. So HACCP yung gagawin mong tools. HACCP is very subjective based on history, data, and experience of well-trained engineer. Kaya yung mga HACCP engineers, medyo matatanda na sila. Kasi may experience na sila in performing HACCP operability. Ang HACCP naman is, madali na yan eh, identified ang hazard. So, titingin lang tayo sa libro, sa documents, and alam na natin kung ano yung ma-identify. The challenge or the key here is this hazard applicable to my setting? Applicable ba yung hazard na yan sa Philippines? Applicable ba yung hazard na yan sa pagbilaw? Applicable ba yung hazard na yan sa location ko? Mga ganon. So again, hindi ka kukuha ng lahat ng hazard. You need to choose which is applicable. Sabi nga nila, again, my term, localize it. Kung ano yung applicable sa industry natin. Importante rin, number 9, managing fire and explosion risk. No? So, doon sa binigay kong overview, yun ang basic. But that will be detailed by our fire and explosion expert. And at the same time, pag everyone is invited to attend yung specifics of fire and explosion, kasi marami rin po kayong pwedeng itanong doon which could address some of your agency's mandates. So maganda rin pong maintindihan natin. And finally, spill management, which is part ng structural design, no? So again, mahal ang infrastructure ng paggawa ng mga containment. So dapat pag dinidesign ito, alam natin kung ano yung i-address niya. So hindi lang tayo magdi-design ng equipment to address spill management. We need to, magkaroon tayo muna ng risk assessment. And dito pumapasok po yung HACCP. Pag sa isang planta, i-apply nila yung HACCP. Then, tsaka nila i-design yung containment facility. In that way, magiging efficient and cost-effective. Yun lang naman importante sa pag-design ng isang equipment, efficient and cost-effective. Nandun po yung, syempre, input ng safety and code sense standard. Okay? So, again, in summary, proper handling and containment of LNG involves the use of materials compatible with cryogenic property, application of sufficient isolation, and depressuring techniques to prevent leakage, maintenance of an ignition-free environment, and adequate training of technical staff, which we will be doing actually. Okay? So, before case studies are more on self-explanatory, no? So I just have it put here, and kung may tanong na lang kayo, if you cannot ask it today, you can always email me, no? But these are history na eh. So I guess ang emerging trends na ngayon is unang-una automation, paggamit ng mga data analytics, improve safety conditions, and of course, applying to the emerging climate change, yung adaptable to emerging climate change, and yung automation, something, mga high-tech technology, and at the same time, nag-i-improve yung paano mo i-conduct yung HACCP, and how are you going to understand yung mga risk management. And sa mga framework din, ina-add na rin nila yung asset management and mechanical integrity because, at the same time, it's not just designing, you need to consider the capital cost. So, again, expensive nga, pero kung malulok into mo naman yung, ano lang yung talagang design. And dito papasok po yung value engineering kasi gumagawa ka lang ng design based sa ina-address mong risk. So, ang value engineering kasi bukod sa ina-address mo yung risk, ano yung purpose na gagawin nung design na yun? So, it's something like specific talaga. Wala nang hocus-pocus ba? Sabi ko nga, straightforward. So, again, HACCP, value engineering, sa value engineering, dito ko pumapasok yung, if you're aware of the Kaizen Japanese technology, no? Kasi dito pumapasok yung nagdi-design ka lang ng planta, ng isang operation, ng isang equipment, kung saan gagamitin. Very specific. At kung ano yung i-address na risk. So ito yung tinatawag na 6S. Kalimutan ko na yung mga green technology. Anyway, that's another story naman. Okay, let me have a break and then let's take a break, and Angelo and Alex. So ilang minutes ba? 10
5
minutes
minutes.
na? 5 minutes na. Okay, go.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Melit. So, we will have a short break lang po, 5 minute break. Please be back here by 2:36 p.m. Also, get ready for a short quiz game. We have prepared prizes. So, sana nakinig kayo. See you in a bit.
Paano ba akong mag-stop share? Okay. So we now go to occupational health in LNG industry. I mentioned earlier na this is very new to us. Although nandiyan na yan because of the OSHA and DOLE, Bureau of Working Condition. I still considered it as in the initial birth pains pa rin, marami pa rin tayong dapat iayos. And for now, I will just focus on LNG. But then again, pag sinabi ko occupational health, as I mentioned, it's correlated to process safety. So I will provide you an overview of what occupational health is all about. Okay, occupational health or occupational safety and health deals with all aspect of safety and health conditions of personnel in the workplace. So pinaghalo. Safety condition ng tao, ng personnel at yung health condition niya. It focuses on the prevention of accident and harm to people from work-related activities. So ano yung mga aspect na kailangan gawin ng company in order to, manage the occupational health, workers' health and working capacity, maintenance and promotion, improvement of working condition conducive to safety and health, development of work organization and working cultures to support health and safety at work. That promotes positive social climate, efficient operation, and enhance productivity, I mean. Occupational health services include among others yung wellness. Di ba makikita natin mga company ngayon, even sa mga agency, meron tayong mga wellness program, mga Zumba-Zumba, di ba? Pre-placement testing, pati yung pag umalis na tayo, yung pre and post employment, occupational therapy, if we get sick because of work-related activities, occupational medicine, we have free at that time I can remember meron pa kaming yung grade sa mata, yung salamin, the company provides us that. Yung simple lang. Regular physical check-up and health-related social activities. For all we know, nakaka-boost ng moral ito because you at the back of your mind, you are being taken care of by the company you work. Diba sabi nga nila, matagal pa yung ini-spend mong time sa kumpanya, sa office, sa work, kesa sa bahay. So it's just but natural for the company to return it back to you. The OSHA is the basis for having this occupational. Kasi matagal na itong na-establish sa US. So, and OSHA has a well-in-place system. Pati yung mga process safety meron sila na adaptable sa occupational health, correlated sa occupational health. They define safety as a state of being safe and condition of being protected from harm and other danger. So, medyo simple lang ang kanilang definition. Occupational health and safety means a standard which require condition or adoption or use of one or more practices, methods, operations, or processes reasonably necessary or appropriate to provide safe and helpful employment or places of employment. The working condition defines the condition in which one works. This consists of lighting. Siyempre, kailangan maliwanag. Temperature and thermal effects. Tama lang sa body temperature natin, vibration, and noise constituent. I remember I have a friend who works in a tower control sa airport. Nung nag-retire siya, bingi siya. Nagkaroon siya ng ear problem, yung bingi. So that's one of the health hazards in working in an environment that is not conducive to your body system. No? Hindi kaya ng human system. Accident, as expected, it is an unexpected event that interrupts the work process. Meaning, nagdi-deviate siya sa normal system. Carries the potential for injury or damage. Potential. It may or may not result in fatality, injury, or property damage, but have the potential to do so. Potential nga eh. It may be attributed to a human factor, a situational factor, which is the operation, equipment or tools, or material, or an environmental factor. Hazard, I mentioned earlier, is an inherent property. Nandiyan na yan. It's a constant property. Mathematically, it's constant. The risk is a function of the probability of loss or danger and the magnitude of a potential loss, damage. So, mathematically, risk is a probability of loss times the magnitude. So, you define risk as based on hazard. you assess the risk based on hazard. Kasi ano yung magnitude ng risk? Ano yung consequence ng risk? It should be based on the hazard. Okay. Danger this is dependent on the relative exposure to a hazard. Danger is also parang risk. Kaya lang nasa severity siya. Kasi there is really something bad that happened. Pag sinabi mong danger, there's negativity. Okay? And again, a general definition of safety is the absence of hazards or reduced exposure to hazard. So, reduce exposure to hazard. Sabi ko nga, hindi talaga tayo magkakaroon ng zero exposure. Reduce lang talaga or minimization. Safety controls the risk of hazard to an acceptable level. Kaya nga minimize natin. So, it's not really a zero. So, pag nakakarinig po kayo ng, I always correct even my colleagues, kahit ako rin nung hindi ko pa inaaral talaga to. Parang alam ko pareho lang talaga sila. But when I started practicing safety and I started doing a lot of study on safety, there's really the difference ng hazard and risk. So when I teach this, I always start with the risk and hazard in teaching safety. Working environment condition, as I mentioned earlier, yung adequate lighting, body temperature, conducive to the working temperature in the area, and vibration, mechanical oscillation about an equilibrium point, and it is another important factor affecting workers' performance, comfort, and safety. So, pag nagkaroon tayo ng ganitong mga, hindi siya unsafe. It's more on, parang hindi comfortable, uncomfortable situation. There is really an issue on safety. Pag talagang, because these four are very, are the major one that affects the working condition. Finally, noise. Vibration in a medium that stimulates the auditory nerve. Sabi ko nga, ang sensitive ng ating tenga when you talk about, and especially in processing operations, really we have to take care of our the ears, pati ang ating mata. And sabi ko nga, yung sa lighting, dito ko kino-correlate yung pag color blind ka, hindi ka pwedeng magtrabaho sa operation. Kasi ang laki ng danger. I also have another colleague who was accepted in a refinery, but when they found out na he's color blind, nililipat siya sa office. Ayaw niya kasi gusto niya talaga work in a refinery. So, it's more on, hindi mo rin alam na colorblind ka eh. So, until na, kasi pre-employment, massive yung medical examination na ina-undergo, especially when you work in a processing industry, processing manufacturing plant. The overview of occupational health as aligned with process safety, we have the chemical hazard identification or the material or product hazard identification. The evaluation of hazard seriousness. This is the risk evaluation. This is the risk assessment. Types of damage caused by hazardous chemicals. This is the impact of having unmanageable risk. Measurement and evaluation of exposure. The magnitude, when you talk about classifying it as low, medium, or high risk, or high severity, low severity. But I don't want to use severity term because pag sinabing severity, nasa high siya. So, low risk na lang, medium risk, and high risk. So, severe high risk. And then prevention and control of exposure. This is the mitigating factor. Okay? So, correlated talaga siya. Akala natin magkahiwalay naman yan eh. Tao, pinag-uusapan, bakit mo i-adapt sa process? They are really correlated. These are all the five elements here are
walang hanggang awa ng Diyos.
the five elements here are the elements of right to know training to be conducted to personnel working in a highly skilled technical role. I mentioned earlier, this is the key to information, education, and communication. Okay? The general overview of nilist down ko isa-isa, no? So, hazard identification, there is the MSDS, getting to know the product, getting to know all about the product, pati yung mga kapatid ng product, pinsan ng product, like what I have done on LNG versus LPG, yung magkaka-align. Evaluation is more on risk, understanding probability and consequence, no? The type of damage caused by the hazardous chemical, dito papasok yung, kasi pag you talk about occupational health na yung mga tinatawag na acute, yung one time, big time, or chronic effect, prolonged agony. Yeah. Sorry for the definition. Kasi nung nagtatrabaho ako sa toxic division namin pag sinabi mong acute, one time, big time lang. Okay? And when you talk about chronic effect, prolonged agony, pangmatagalan, dala-dala mo siya hanggang tumanda ka. Adverse health effects like asphyxiants, carcinogens, corrosive, these are some of the hazards ng health, can cause damage. And safety hazards like combustible, explosion could also affect the damage. Okay? Measurement and evaluation, this is where papasok yung mga exposure limits and paano siya sinasampulan. So pag talagang doon ka nagwo-work sa isang industry na mini-measure yung toxicity, like ano bang highly pesticide, yan. Mini-measure nila yung toxicity ng mga exposure limit, threshold value, tapos every week, tinetest yung blood mo kung meron ng toxic effect element doon. They call it, cholinesterase test. Kasi yung cholinesterase test, meron kang traces of toxic elements from pesticide chemicals. So, yung mga researcher doon, ganun ang ginagawa sa kanila. So, it has something to do with exposure limits. So, pag mataas yung limit mo, parang magka-quarantine ka, ganun. Prevention and control of exposure, this is the practice of applying controls ko, di ba? Sabi ko, mitigating controls. So, nandito yung kailangan mag-substitute tayo ng product. For example, separate additional additives to put in cleaning the gas, removing the sulfur. So, dapat less hazardous. Isolation, ventilation is so important in occupational safety, as well as good housekeeping. Administrative measures is more on job rotation. I define it as, kasi nung araw, nung panahon namin when I work in a highly toxic environment, pag mataas ang aking cholinesterase test, yung toxic level ng dugo ko, nag-o-office work ako. So parang work from home. Nung araw, office work, wala ka sa planta. Ngayon kasi, because of the pandemic, work from home tayo. So ganun ko lang ina-address yun. And then of course, preventive ang PPE and control of exposure. Lagi kong madalas sabihin sa mga estudyante ko sa lab, lab gown, goggles, safety goggles. Ngayon nga, mask na, diba? And then after a full day lab work, you take a full bath. Pati yung ating mga buhok. Kasi ang toxic elements, madaling kumapit sa buhok. Prone ang buhok natin. Nakapitan ng mga chemical. So, pag galing ka talaga sa planta, you need to take a full bath. Take a full bath. Ito yung tanong ko kanina, occupational hazard. So these are the listed occupational hazards. Eye irritation, that's occupational hazard. Odor, more on, ang description kasi dito, iba na yung nag-iimit sa hindi bad odor o bad breath. Iba na yung nag-iimit sa katawan mo. You're exposed to something toxic. Visible dust clouds or fumes. And also, balik ako sa odor, aside doon sa nag-iimit sa katawan mo, yung environment, of course, nandoon. Okay? Noise, chemical spills, persistent symptoms or recurring illnesses, yung paulit-ulit, that's, you need to really get a doctor and get medical check-up. Sight and sound. So ito yung mga occupational hazard. I have not put the definition here, but when I think bago mo isubmit to, Angelo, lalagyan ko nila ng definition dito para meron silang basihan. Okay?
Sige po.
Okay. Ito rin yung tanong ko kanina, the interface between human and workplace is what we call ergonomics. So alam na ng mga colleagues natin to sa DOLE, ng ating mga friends from DOLE, it's a fitting the work to the person or improving workers' performance and safety. Like, for example, yung mga control panel natin sa control room, design sa height ng Pilipino, medium. But when you work even sa Japan, medium ang mga tao sa Japan. But when you work in say Netherlands, sa abroad, yung mga control room nila doon, kasi maraming processing plant doon, ay, napakatataas ng kanilang control room kasi matataas ang average height ng Dutch. So may problem sila on ergonomics. So nung nagkaroon ng diversity program, you can work you can be an exchange, seconded to a company, to a sister company in Amsterdam or Holland, hirap na hirap kami sa control room kasi ang tataas. So it has something to do with ergonomics. And properly designed workplace equipment, facilities, and tools can address this risk, occupational injury and illness, ayan, mga absenteeism, productivity, lahat, comfort on the job. So there is a illustrative figure here that relationship between the worker and the workplace wherein the worker interacts with the tools. And in return, the workplace provides information back to the worker through displays and other instruments. So tinutulungan niya rin yung worker to interact. Kaya nandito papasok yung information, education, and communication. Binigyan mo yung personnel mo ng ganitong system, dapat turuan mo. So you provide him the tools and controls and the instrument in a workplace, you have to teach them. Meron kang dapat responsibility for the IEC. In that way, magiging maganda yung interface ng personnel and the workplace. So that's basically what ergonomics is all about. Nowadays, talagang pinapractice ito because we put a lot of weight sa health ng occupational health. So, isa sa mga sinasama ngayon sa PSM is ergonomics. So, I think we need to pag-uusapan pa namin to ng DOLE doon sa proposed adoption ng standards para doon sa ergonomics. Adoption ng ergonomics. The generic occupational risks and control are the force, paano yung amount na ina-exert mo. This is manufacturing ergonomics. Yung force, the amount of work ina-exert mo. Frequency, madalas ba? O required in specific posture. Madalas ka bang nakatayo? Madalas ka bang nakaupo? Madalas ka bang umaakyat sa tangke every hour, nag-check, nagmo-monitor, wala bang remote control? Repetitive can be harmful, no? Repetitiveness can be harmful, and stressful posture when sustained or used repeatedly can be harmful. So magkadikit pag sinabing paulit-ulit na ginagawa, frequency, no, and you exert a lot of effort, it's stressful. And yeah, when you work in an operation, especially kahit nagmo-monitor ka ng, you do inspection, di ba? Yung mga sa mga regulatory agencies natin na perform inspection, hindi natin kaya mag-inspect ng whole day, ano? Bear in mind na more than 12 hours of exposure to a job is unhealthy, unsafe. And that is a fact, no? Scientific evidence yan. Even driving, you cannot drive more than 12 hours continuous. Kailangan magpahinga. Kaya nagtataka ako sa mga security guard 24 hours. There's no such thing as working 24 hours. Pagod ang katawan mo. Scientifically, merong evidence yun. So hanggang 12 hours lang po talaga tayo. Kaya nga, di ba, ang office work 8, magta-travel ka pa, magta-traffic ka pa, etc., etc. And this is something like parang checklist, yes or no lang. This is self-explanatory. But we can have it used in your company, no? Baka your medical practitioner is applying something ergonomic. So we can address this. We can address some issues on ergonomics by applying this particular checklist. But you can actually modify this according to your, or what we call localize it, according to your company. Even sa mga agencies, lalo na yung mga field work, we can always adapt this. This is self-explanatory. So mag-checklist ka lang, may trauma, very high, low, balik ka lang. So para siyang flowchart lang po, no? Cost and benefit ng ergonomics is malaki because you prevent injury. And when you prevent injury, there is savings. Hindi ko naman sinasabi na, I think it's not proper, no? Injury costs a lot of, there's a corresponding cost on related injury. So gagastos ng malaki ang kumpanya. And even ikaw ayaw mo, sino ba gustong magkasakit? So there's a cost and benefit on like a lot of things like design time, engineering time, tool change, skilled traded time, materials, machine downtime, ito importante, and training. So always the benefits surpass the cost. Alam natin yan dapat. Qualitatively, kung hindi natin siya ma-quantify, benefits should surpass qualitatively the cost. So parang nung diniscuss din po namin yung PRP namin sa cost and benefit, hindi kami makapag-quantify kasi walang binibigay na elements of cost yung agencies. And alam namin mahirap. Hindi iba naka-quantify. So nag-qualify kami for that, and there is a process. There is a technique in doing that. Okay, I think that's all for the occupational health. Now I will will provide you a glimpse of the process safety, occupational health in our PRP, no? So globally, in the regulatory structures, meron tayong ginagawa sa LNG. So sa US, they call it PERC. Sa Canada, Energy Regulator. Sa Japan, METI. Tayo DOE, of course, the main. But there are agencies attached. So yung agency na attached sa LNG, of course kasama din yung sa PSOH ito po, naka-focus lang po ako sa PSOH. Although kasama ko rin dito ang DENR dapat but in-isolate din namin na in-stand alone namin ng DENR para ma-confine yung pag-address namin ng mga dapat i-recommend sa kanila. So sa aming of course, kasama sa DNR yung DOLE din sa environment. Pati yung LLDA po. Okay? So sa regulatory structure ng PSOH, kasama po namin yung ports, marine, and fire. So DOLE is our main. Kasama din namin yung Bureau of Customs and DOH, Bureau of Quarantine, BOQ. So, sila yung mga aligned agencies. Okay. So, dun sa PRP po namin, we have listed down the regulatory recommendation. Dalawang klase po. Classify namin into reforms. Yung mga existing na minodify namin to insert or to adopt LNG activities, or to adapt to LNG industry, or to adapt to LNG operation. And then alternatives, totally wala. Like yung cryogenic, yung mga ganyan. Those are alternatives regulatory recommendation. So what we have, our basis for doing this recommendation, we have legal basis, current standards used dahil sa reforms, stage of operation, tinignan namin end-to-end, from conceptualization to commissioning and operation, and benefits over cost, which is, I mentioned, qualitative ang ginawa namin. We drafted a flowchart to see what are those na nag-overlap. Kasi may mga existing regulation na pareho, which we recommend na pag-isahin, which is acceptable naman sa mga agency, no? And this is more on maging efficient lang yung process ng LNG, PDNGI, LNG regulation. And then, finally, we propose the adoption of codes and standards we have identified based on years of study and based on key informant interview at saka mga focus group discussion among agencies. So nagkaroon kami ng mga discussion. Hindi lang po kami yung nag-formulate. So per LNG critical components at saka yung mga reforms, present namin sa kanila for their comments and further inputs, Of course, in all of these things, kaagapay po namin ng Department of Energy kasi sila yung major ministerial agency natin na nag-handle ng LNG. So sila din yung major kukuha nung benefits, ng beneficiary namin dahil sila yung maglalatag sa mga agency. So, kami lang po yung parang naging inassign ng DOE, assignment nito. Parang ganun lang po. But of course, we need to, from time to time, we need to regularly consult DOE kung ano yung, tama na ba yung ginawa namin or kulang pa. So we are grateful to DOE, OIMB, Director Abad, Ma'am Lau, and the rest of the team. So especially the team of the Natural Gas Management Division. Okay, and these are the agencies we classify. So, ayan, process safety, fire and explosion, environment, coastal and marine. I think nakita niyo na po ito. Nag-ano lang po ako, overview lang ako. And let me cite before I end, pakita ko lang po yung ginawa namin for DOLE kasi sila yung main beneficiary ng PSOH. So, in-identify namin kung ano yung mga permit nila dito, ano yung mga main issue, ano yung i-recommend namin based on reforms or alternative ba. Kasi the concept of recommendation is more on, if there is an existing, you just review it. Do not reinvent. Pero pag wala talaga, doon ka magbibigay ng recommendation. Doon ka gagawa ng bagong proposal. So what we have done is to review everything. Parang nag-gap analysis kami. Hazard identification. And then gap analysis. Parang ganun. And then finally, we identify those that has gaps and then we recommend. Either, sabi ko nga kanina, pinakita ko, meron kaming na-identify for reforms and meron kaming na-identify for alternative. And of course, bago namin i-identify yon, tinignan namin yung benepisyo over cost. So, ito po yung na-identify namin. Let me give you one example. So, process digitalization. One important thing here is allows applicant to submit some document requirements through email as a beginning until the time na magkaroon na ng fully implemented digital platform. And then, nirecommend namin yung eBOS na tinitingnan ngayon ng DOE kasi siya yung parang attached. Meron na kasing, ang eBOS kasi sa power plant eh. So, sinuggest namin na bakit hindi nila i-extend sa PDNGI. They're looking into it, no? And then the benefits. Ano yung benepisyo na importante kasi ito in anything. Sabi ko nga, in value engineering, you need to set the benefit that is more than the cost. Kahit qualitative siya. Ma-identify mo siya. Kasi pag nag-propose ka ng something at walang value, there's no such thing na, hindi siya acceptable. It's like designing a plant. You don't design a plant without profit. No? Pag nag-design ka ng planta, just the heck of designing it at wala kang profitability, you're not a successful engineer. It should be profitable. So yun yung concept. Even sa chemical engineering, tinuturo yan. In designing a plant, the product should sell at a profit. So ganun din po yung paggawa natin ng regulation. It should reap on benefit, no? Hindi lang basta-basta. Ayan. So meron construction. Inisa-isa po namin ito, and then ang DOLE na-discuss na namin to. No? So, gano'n lang po yung ginawa namin. And then, nandito po yung mga recommendation namin na standards and NFP, mga standards for adoption. So, binalidate po namin siya with technical justification. Hindi lang kami basta, ito palitan mo, ganito na lang gawin mo. And then, tatanungin ng DOLE, ano po yung basihan mo? Siyempre, ganun ang agency. Kailangan, bago nila i-accept ang recommendation mo, you should validate it with technical evidence. So, it's the technical regulatory framework of the PDNGI is basically science. All the recommendation, all the existing regulatory framework should be based on science. Wala tayong invento dito. So anyone could question us, but we always back with science. You could always question agency, but they are back with science. Especially when you deal with, like, the product under the Department of Energy. These are highly technical. So yung mga sa DENR, LLDA, lahat ng ito may evidence ng science. And of course, i-adapt din natin yung existing laws and regulation policy. Okay? I think this is the last slide. So, yeah, para enough time tayo to answer question if there's any. And yeah, I hope I can answer your question. And thank you I really amazed. I mean, I really so grateful for the attendance. Napakalaki. Talaga po, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. Hindi ko in-expect na ganito ang attendance po namin. And yeah, we will make sure na we will live up to your expectation. Natutulungan po namin kayo sa lahat ng aming makakaya. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Angelou. Thank you, everyone.
Yan. Thank you, Engineer Villanueva, for a thorough and comprehensive discussion on process safety and occupational health. So yeah, totoo po yung sinabi ni Ma'am. Sana same attendance din tayo with the checklist and codes and standards training. So we will update you regarding the schedule of these trainings later on. So now we'll open the virtual floor for questions. So for the participants who want to ask questions directly, please press the raise hand icon. And we will also be reading the questions posted in the chat box. So do we have any questions po from our agencies, participants? All right, someone has raised his hand. Mr. Paul Kevin Arcoino from Marina.
Yes, sir. You can ask. You can open your mic.
Ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon po.
Marinig po. Clarify ko lang po kung kasi yung mga substance ini-extract from seabed or sa ilalim pa. Tapos nakukuha yon through rig forms o mga platforms, oil rigs. Tsaka yung substance, ma'am, yung LNG nakaka-cause frostbite po. Paano po pag hindi pa na-refine yung substance, nakaka-cause din po ba ng frostbite?
Ay, ganito po yun. Mandatory po magkaroon ng pag in-extract from the well, yung una, which is wala tayo, no? Malampaya lang. I mean, madideplete na. Pag in-extract from malampaya, meron tayong tinatawag na gas cleaning bago ibigay sa power plant. So, wala po tayong frostbite dito at this point in time kasi diretso na po pipeline. Ang frostbite po nangyayari pag nag-import po tayo ng LNG, ng natural gas. Yung natural gas kasi hindi siya pwedeng i-transfer ng mahabang through vessel ng gas. So you have to convert it into liquid. So yun yung liquid. At doon kailangan mong i-store ng negative, ano po daw, 163, no? So, yung pag-handle po nun, doon yung lumalabas yung health hazard ng frostbite. So, either nandun ka sa storage facility. So far, hindi pa po natin ma-experience yun kasi hindi pa po nag-start ang importation natin. Pero, syempre, as a general rule, ina-anticipate po natin yung baka pwedeng mangyari po yun. Ang right now na pwede talagang prone tayo is yung asphyxiation. Yung mga release ng baka masuffocate yun. Kaya PPE talaga yung kailangan po natin. Ganun lang po.
Okay po. So hindi po 'yan kasi sa rigs po, mga oil rigs, tapos yung nasa ilalim kinukuha pataas. Tapos halo-halo po 'yun, may mga putik, mga
Ay, opo,
mineral oil.
nire-refine. Tama.
Oh, nire-refine pa 'yan, ma'am. Tapos pag nahawakan po 'yun, wala namang mga effect po, ano?
Ay, wala naman. Meron
Okay.
kasing mechanical process. At saka sir, yung bago i-refine, may term doon, bago i-clean up yung, isi-separate isi-separate ang gas sa crudo at sa water. And then tsaka i-clean bago i-deliver sa refinery.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Opo, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Sir Paul. Miss Melanie Banayos is raising her
Oh,
hand.
Ma'am Melanie, hello po. Welcome
ma'am.
back.
Hi ma'am, good afternoon po.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes po. Gusto ko lang pong ano ba 'yun? May nakita nga kami kasi kanina, nilagay niyo doon na ang reference natin is OSHA. Yeah. Yung ating OSHA standards, ang reference talaga natin is OSHA, but
Yes.
we tried na as sa ating OSHA standards, parang based sa OSHA, gumawa tayo ng Philippine version ng
Yun.
OSHA. Opo.
Tama.
So, oo. So, yung ano kanina, yung hierarchy of controls is although ano naman, but almost the same naman, but ang kasi natin is most likely tatlo lang po yan.
Okay.
Engineering, administrative controls, and then the PPE. May dalawa din na before that, ano ba yun, substitution, elimination, yun lang po yung ano natin. So anyway naman, as we go along siguro,
oo.
i-check natin itong mga natin.
Oo. Pasok naman, Ma'am Melanie. Ang
Yes,
pinisan ko lang kanina kasi general overview eh.
Opo.
Pagdating sa mga agency na doon na tayo mag-drain ba, mag-choose na ano pa yung adaptable talaga.
Opo. Yun lang po lang man, ma'am.
Thank
And
you,
then,
ma'am.
And then sa ergonomics, we are in the process of amending our OSH standards, and
Okay.
meron na tayong specific rule for ergonomics.
Good.
Although meron during trainings naman po, meron talaga tayong sinasamang trainings on ergonomics, and wala lang siya sa yellow book, sa OSH standards natin. Meron tayong guidelines na nilabas through department order.
Okay.
So parang ano kasi noon pa, noong 1978 pa kasi yung ating OSH standard, kaya wala pa yung ergonomics nung time.
Oo nga, tama.
Yeah, so naglabas lang tayo lately, so naka-department order lang po siya. Opo. Anyway, ikaw naman natin.
Kasama yan sa ano natin, ma'am.
Opo. So, yun lang, ma'am. Salamat po.
Thank you, Ma'am Melanie.
Opo.
Thank you, Ma'am Melanie. So do we have any other questions from the agencies? More participants? All right, so thank you for all of your questions. And just a quick reminder for those who haven't filled up the attendance form, kindly do so. So the link is posted in the chat box. This is for the preparation of the certificate. Thank you, everyone. So before we officially end, we would like to remind everyone about the second training session scheduled tomorrow, which will focus on the mechanical equipment or facilities of LNG. So we hope to see all of you there. So that concludes our first session. We once again want to thank Engineer Melit Villanueva and her technical assistant, Mr. Paolo Bartola, for all your time and effort in
Thank you.
providing this PSOH course.
Thank you,
And most
Paolo.
importantly, we want to thank all the agencies and LGUs for attending.
Thank you
See you all
po.
tomorrow.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank
At
you po.
thank you rin po, Ma'am Melit.
Thank you. GPDP, thank you. DOE, thank you.
Salamat po, Ma'am Melet.
Melanie, thank you. PCG, PPA, Marina, thank you. DOC, thank you. Attorney Karen.
Thank you po.
Thank you. EMB, nandito, nakita ko. Thank you din po, LLDA.